The next team that your question is about, their head coach had to come to a realization about balancing, work, life, everything like that. Hit us with your question about the Los Angeles Rams and Sean McVay's team.
I want to know, what is this Rams offense going to look like with Davante Adams as the number 2 receiver there? And this is another one where I feel like we've spent all summer talking about Matt Stafford's back, and is he going to be okay? And is he going to be out there week 1? And even if he's out there week 1, how long is he going to stay healthy? Can he take all these hits? Is he going to make it through the season? And we haven't talked enough about how good this offense could be if Stafford does stay upright and if he's okay and if he's healthy this year, because Davante Adams can get them back and maybe even better than what they were a couple of years ago when we had a younger, healthier Cooper Kupp out there, when we had 2 strong receiving options in this offense, where last year it was injuries to Puka, it was injuries to Cooper Kupp. Even when Cooper Kupp came back, he faded down the stretch, wasn't the same player. Davante Adams last year, he was pretty good. And I know it's funny to talk the way about a guy who's going to turn 33 in December, especially a receiver who's going to turn 33 in December. But it looked last year like he could still be very, very productive. And this is a player who has been good for so long. 8 top 10 fantasy finishes at the receiver position over his last 9 campaigns. And the one year where he didn't do it, he was the wide receiver 18. So it's he wasn't even bad that year. He just wasn't quite as good, right?
How terrible.
And last year, it was a bit of a bounce back because that wide receiver 18 one came in 2023. So last year, it was good to see him get back up there into the top 10. He finished 10th, but still in the top 10, averaged 14.2 fantasy points per game. And yeah, he had his buddy, Aaron Rodgers, just kind of peppering him with targets down the stretch. But still, in this offense, there's going to be a lot of volume. It's going to be very concentrated between him and Puka. And I wonder, what is the ceiling? What is McVay going to be able to do? We know he can scheme open his players. Is that going to be a great thing for Davante Adams? I think it is. I think this could be a great situation for him, going from a situation in New York where, the play callers, I know Rodgers was there, but not the best. Some of those situations in Vegas too. And he still kept producing. Now he gets to pair up with McVay, with Stafford, with Puka. What could this offense look like? It's going to be really, really good.
I think so too. I'm so fascinated to see Davante Adams in week 1. He's one of the biggest week 1 reveals that I'm looking forward to. Last season in reception perception, the numbers were down because they were down from the best receiver of this era. You know what I'm saying? He still had an 80th percentile success rate versus man, 89th percentile success rate versus press. This is still a guy who can get open against man press coverage at a really, really high level. And make no mistake, that is why the Rams gave the stiff arm to a storied franchise player, a Super Bowl hero, a Triple Crown winner, said, Cooper Kupp, see you later, because he can't beat man coverage anymore. And they immediately signed an older receiver. It's yeah, we got to get rid of this old guy, Cooper Kupp. Let's bring in a guy who's been in the league several years longer because he can beat man coverage, because it's still stuck in Sean McVay's head what it felt like, Boone, to have Odell Beckham in that Super Bowl run, during the Super Bowl run, to have a true X receiver who can line up on the line of scrimmage and win against press man coverage in these backside routes. It's why they signed Allen Robinson. That did not work out. It's why they're doing it again with Davante Adams here. The one thing I will say, there's part of me that thinks that Davante Adams is going to come out here and get 12 targets, look awesome, and people are going to say, did we make a mistake ranking Puka Nacua as a first rounder? And maybe Davante Adams is the one. I think that's within the range of outcomes. I also think, by the way, because Stafford has practiced so little time in the offseason, Boone, what do you think? How big is the percentage chance that Adams and Stafford come out there against a great Texans secondary, by the way? Probably going to see a lot of Derek Stingley because he's the perimeter player. And he gets 5 targets a game, and those 5 targets aren't even close to because they're just not on the same page chemistry-wise yet. Which of those extreme ends do you think is more likely?
So normally I would be quite concerned about the chemistry aspect, but when you're talking about 2 Hall of Fame players, I'm a little less worried about it then. I think they'll probably be okay. The matchup is certainly a bigger concern. That Texans defense is legit. It's going to be a problem, and it's going to make this game very, very interesting. We're going to be able to see, is Matt Stafford going to be healthy? Because he's going to have to hold up here against a really strong pass rush, a really good defense. Now, we talked also in the summer about his tackle, Alaric Jackson. Is he going to be out there? He's practicing in full. Looks like he's going to be fine too. So all that time we wasted discussing that, we're making up for it now by talking about what's actually going to happen fantasy-wise with this offense. You also look at it like the schedule is really, really decent for the Rams this year. Like, I know this first matchup's going to be tough, but Stafford, the 7th easiest fantasy quarterback slate. Kyren Williams, the 11th easiest slate among running backs. Puka and Adams, the 11th easiest at receiver. So we'll see what this test in week 1 shows us. If they can get through on that, man, that looks really, really good for what they could potentially be this season, because the Texans are going to be a problem for a lot of people. But I have, maybe as excited as I am about the Texans defense, I'm equally a little bit concerned about the Texans offense. And I know this question isn't about that, but we saw today Christian Kirk is a hamstring injury. Looks like he's not going to play in week 1. Don't know how long that could potentially keep him out, but they do have some younger players in Jaden Higgins, in Jalen Noel. These guys are going to step up. I mean, Noel steps right into that Christian Kirk spot, and he could produce in that spot. He becomes like a sneaky potential, like really, really deep play for week 1. But there's so many issues with this Texans offense. When you talk about the offensive line, when you talk about the backfield and not really knowing what you're going to get from the running backs there because Joe Mixon's not around. Now we're talking about Christian Kirk, who they really talked up all off season. And we're saying, you know, he's the slot demon and he was the guy that was going to play in the slot and 3 receiver sets. He was also the guy playing in 2 receiver sets across from Nico Collins. And now he's not going to be out there week 1. So when there's one issue, not that worried. When you start to get a bunch of red flags, I've talked about this with other situations. When you get a bunch of red flags like that, it starts to make me quite concerned. And CJ Stroud was somebody that I was looking at as a guy that could get off to a hot start. This all adds up to make me a little less excited about him early on, but maybe this just means that the Rams are going to have an easier go of it if that Texans offense can't produce the same way in week 1.
No, it's super fair. I will say Nico Collins against that secondary is a big mismatch. So as long as CJ Stroud can get a few seconds in the pocket, that Rams secondary is exploitable. But yeah, man, I am really excited to see these 2 Texans rookie wide receivers. I think Kirk was a nice late round flyer and somebody that is interesting. But at this point, like I'd be wanting to pick up and stash a Jalen Noel. Higgins was probably more widely drafted, but yeah, like park Jalen Noel at the end of your bench if you've got space and see what happens, because I think that guy's so talented. I think he's going to be better than Jaden Higgins in the long term. I won't be surprised if we're talking about him as a priority pickup on the waiver wire show next week, Boone, which you will be joining me for as well. But let's go to your next question here, your 5th one of 6.
Well, and we will say, depending when people are listening to the show, this game may have already happened because it is happening on Friday night. But I want to know, in that Chiefs-Chargers game, is Xavier Worthy ready to like make a big leap here with Rashee Rice suspended? Because we saw him down the stretch last season, you know, from week 11 to week 17, his role grew. You know, he started getting more targets. He was the wide receiver 25 in fantasy points per game during that stretch, but he was only 32nd in targets per game. So we were seeing him find the end zone. We were seeing him get some carries. We were seeing them use him in ways that really elevated his fantasy numbers. And sure, he's a versatile player. They can use that speed in a lot of different ways. You know, they've talked about how they want to push the ball downfield more. Who better than the guy that was, you know, one of the fastest players ever at the combine? Why not go with him downfield? But can he be like that number 1 target, Harmon? I don't know if I've heard your take on Worthy yet, or if we've just talked about so many players over the summer that it's just melded in there with all the other takes. But I'm curious, like, what do you think? Can he potentially be that number 1 option while Rashee Rice is out? Or is he somebody that isn't necessarily going to command that kind of volume that we're going to see a lot of other options in this passing attack step up? Even some deep guys, like guys you don't expect, like the Juju Smith-Schusters and Tyquan Thornton. And could we see all these other guys kind of contribute and help fill the void, as opposed to just having like that 1 star receiver be the guy while Rice is out?
My guess is that, yeah, we probably will see Hollywood Brown have some moments. I think Juju he'll have moments because he just always pops up for a couple of moments with this Kansas City Chiefs team. It's like just what he's doing now at this point. I think those guys will have roles, but Yeah, well, you're right. I said this week with Ray Garvin. Actually, we did a whole segment on Xavier Worthy, and I was like, I feel like he's a guy we just didn't talk enough about this whole offseason, mostly because we were so focused on Rashee Rice. What do you do with Rashee Rice? And when is he going to play? When is he going to be out there? And we just probably didn't spend enough time talking about Xavier Worthy, and I feel like he's a candidate for the big week one overreactions one way or another. This is, like you said, this is an island game. It's on Friday. As long as the boomers can figure out YouTube, everybody will be watching the game. And like, I actually think I'm pretty optimistic about Worthy going into this game. The Chargers were the deep plays to Xavier Worthy they were so off the mark last year between Patrick Mahomes and Xavier Worthy himself. It hit against the Chargers early in the season. He had that like big post route because the Chargers were the fourth most zone coverage team last year. They play a lot of too high safeties, but Worthy is the guy that can just rip through zone coverage and just split the safeties. We saw him do it late in the Super Bowl, a couple of backup safeties. I feel like we could get one of those plays in this game too. And then the entire Twitter timeline is like, oh my God, were we too low on Xavier Worthy? We were too low on Xavier Worthy. But yeah, I actually am pretty optimistic about him going into this game. Whether he's going to be that true like number one funnel target, that I'm a little less sure about.
Yeah, the game you're mentioning, I think, was the 73 yards and a score that he had. That was early in the season.
Yep.
A little later in the season when they played, I think he went 5 for 41. He had a carry in that game as well.
That was when they were like peppering him with the underneath stuff, and it was just like all that was like low ADOT targets. So do you think it's going to be more of that or more of like the early season kind of deeper usage?
I think they're going to try to get him involved every possible way. I don't think they're going to just focus on one. I think they need him to kind of expand, and they've had all offseason to prepare for this. They didn't know exactly when the Rice suspension was going to happen, but they knew this was coming. Now, the thing that I think complicates it a little more is Jalen Royals, who was the guy I think that was going to step into this Rice role, who they were potentially preparing for that, is hurt and has already been ruled out for this game. That's why I didn't even mention him earlier. You hit on some of the other guys like Hollywood Brown. He'll have some big games once in a while, but I think we're at a point now in his career where he's just not going to be like that guy. He's not going to be a top receiver. He's going to be somebody that's more of like a field stretcher and a contributing player, like a lot of these other guys are that we're mentioning in that Chiefs receiving core. The other interesting piece that we're not mentioning is Travis Kelce, right? And he's a declining player. We got a little bit of like, best shape of his life kind of stuff when it was like he's lost some weight, he's getting in wedding shape, like all that sort of stuff.
Right.
You look at him, could he come out, early in the season, an older player, but as rested as he's going to be all year, come out early in the year and have some good games? I think that is certainly possible here for Kelce. But you look at the matchups last year, like Mahomes was fairly quiet against the Chargers. And I know you mentioned areas where they can pick them apart, but the Chargers defense is pretty good. And he was held under 250 passing yards in both their games last year, only had one passing touchdown in each game. So not really a lot to hang your hat on there other than the hope that maybe they're going to come out with something different this year. Maybe they are going to push the ball downfield a little bit more, but is that going to happen in week one? And are they going to be able to do that without the guy who I think is their best receiver in Rashee Rice? Or are they just going to have to figure out a way to like dink and dunk like they were doing last year, get through the first 6 weeks, be 3-3, 4-2, whatever. I mean, knowing them, they'll still be 6-0, but that's just the Bills fan and me being bitter. But they'll find a way early in the season, and then we won't see like that version of the offense that they talked up all offseason. We won't see that until midway through the year or later in the season when Rice is back and going at full speed.
Yeah, potentially. I'm really just interested in both these offenses, man. Like, they're two that I'm super curious about. There's a lot of like Chargers pessimism right now, it seems like, especially in like the traditional NFL world. But I still think this could be a pretty good ecosystem. There's a lot to learn on both sides of the ball in that Friday matchup.